Test, test, test. No, that's not good. Um, test, test, test. No, that's speaking too much. Man. Okay, so. Okay. All right, so how you going? My name's Xfish, and I'm here to give you a dissertation, or I should say presentation, on the state of Hungarian democracy, or the lack of it, I should say, in 2024. I'm recording this in May 2024, so things may change in the future, but yes, this video will remain here. Really, there's only a few things that I want to demonstrate, and we'll get into what those things are. I would preface this video by saying it's mostly intended for audiences who are either not Hungarian electors, so not Hungarian citizens, or Hungarian citizens who have not kept up with the state of politics in the last few years and just want to, I guess, get back into it or inform themselves. Yeah, so and there's a lot of stuff to talk about, so I'll get into it. Meet you on the first canvas. All right, so here's my premise and my explanation of what this video is actually about. I will add a caveat to it, which is to say that I am a Hungarian citizen. However, I have no political affiliation and I have not voted in any parliamentary elections so far. What inspired me to make this video was seeing various online forums berate Hungarian citizens and for a variety of decisions and changes adopted by the Hungarian nomenclatura. We'll get into actually what I mean by nomenclatura is the system. God damn it. Okay, let me take this shit again. Okay. All right. All right. How you going? My name's Xfish, and I'm here to give you a presentation on the state of Hungarian politics and democracy in 2024. I should say the lack of democracy, which is what we'll try and demonstrate in this video. This video is mostly intended for people who are either not Hungarian citizens or Hungarian citizens who are not yet electors or have not kept up with the state of politics for the last few years. So yeah, we have a lot of stuff to talk about, so I'm gonna quit yapping and let's get into it. All right, so my premise to this video is actually just a quick addendum, which is to say that I am a Hungarian citizen. I have no political affiliation. I have not voted in any parliamentary elections so far. What inspired me to make this video was seeing various online forums berate Hungarian citizens for for a variety of decisions and changes adopted by the Hungarian nomenclatura. By nomenclatura, I mean the classical East German definition of it, which is kind of the system in place currently, which grants positions of power only to those who are closely affiliated with the party. In this case, it isn't the Workers' Party; it's the Fidesz KDNP alliance, which we'll get into. And the purpose of this video is the following. Basically 5 points that I want to touch on. Demonstrate that post-2012 Hungary is not a healthy democracy. Demonstrate that post-2012 Hungary is not a flawed democracy. Demonstrate that post-2012 Hungary is a hybrid regime. And demonstrate that Hungarian citizens have virtually no access to independent media. And demonstrate that Hungarian citizens have virtually no control over the hybrid regime's decision-making. We'll get into what all of these terms mean, especially with post-2012 Hungary, healthy democracy, flawed democracy, and hybrid regime. These are all terms we'll touch on. Another addendum that I would love to add to this video is Hungarian names are written backwards. So you'll place the surname first and then the name, somebody's first name. So, for example, Viktor Orbán is not Viktor Orbán, but he's Orbán Viktor. That's the native way of saying his name. So that's about it. Let's get to the first canvas. We have 4 canvases lined up for you. This is Obsidian software. Yeah, let's jump into it. All right, so like I said, this is the first canvas. This is basically the entire history of Hungarian parliamentary elections, spanning from 1985, which we'll talk about a little bit, to 2022. The next elections are lined up for 2026. I'll give my prediction for what will happen in that case. And we'll jump straight into trying to demonstrate that Hungary is not a healthy democracy, it's not a flawed democracy, and it is, however, a hybrid regime. But before that, let's go over the history really quickly for those who don't know. Of course, Hungary was part of the Warsaw Pact, so the Eastern Bloc. So stretching from 1956, which is when we had our civil revolution against the Soviet Union and their presence of military personnel inside Hungary. Up until 1989, we had this Kadarist government in place. A lot of people call this Kadarist state, or this one-party socialist state, the goulash communist state. I really think that's kind of a reduction. It's not exactly Hungarian communism. In fact, it was never even called communism. It was always labeled socialism. But also, even under Hungarian socialism, there were different figures at play before Kádár, Kádár János József, such as Rákosi. Rákosi was much more, just like an iron fist in terms of Hungarian politics. Even mentioning him today is kind of, it provokes a reaction out of people, I guess. So yes, from 56 until 89, we had the Hungarian People's Republic, which was a one-party socialist Kadarist state. From 89, which is when we had, of course, the liberation from the Warsaw Pact and the Eastern Bloc with the fall of the wall and the Soviet Union. We had the Third Hungarian Republic. Of course, the first two were firstly after the liberation of Hungary from Austria-Hungary, and then the second was after World War One. Of course, after World War II, there was a slight period in between which there was kind of a red terror going around Hungary. We had a quick, extremely aggressive and extremely totalitarian communist government in place. So Third Hungarian Republic up until 2012, or New Year's Eve of 2012, which is when the revised Hungarian constitution appeared. in fact, we don't even call it constitution. It's more like fundamental law, the literal translation of it. Alaptörvény in Hungarian. Let's read into what the revised constitution actually is. The 2012 revision to the Hungarian constitution changed multiple things about the election process, including but not limited to changed number of seats up for grabs to 199, changed election counties and their shapes, date of elections to follow, reduction to a single round election process, and the way that seats are gained and lost compared to the percentage of votes in favor of a given party. This revised constitution made it easier for a government already in power to hold on to that power, even if their numbers start declining in following elections. Any and all law in Hungarian law can be modified via a 2/3 majority in voting, which is what we've seen mostly in the past few years. In particular, the reshaping of counties served to make Fidesz and KDNP. Fidesz is the current. Fidesz stands for Fiatal Demokraták Szövetsége, which is the Young Democrats Alliance. They no longer use that acronym, but they still go by Fidesz. KDNP is the Christian Democratic National Party, which actually has a much longer history, starting all the way in 1949, when they were outlawed by, of course, the one-party socialist government. So those two form kind of the center-right alliance, which certain parties get left out of because they are too extremist. Anyway, the dominant party in almost all counties, while also restricting the opposition parties to 3 or 4 counties at best, excluding the capital, which is always highly contested. We'll look at the maps in a moment. This revised constitution has since been modified 12 times so far, with the revisions being criticized by international media for being anti-gay, anti-protest, and most of all, anti-democratic. You can read all of those. I'll leave the sources up for everything that I cite. You can read the new constitution, and you can read the list of new modifications up until the 12th revision. So 1, 2, 3, I'll leave it up for a moment. There you go. So from 2012, effectively what we have is Hungary is no longer labeled as a republic. Much like the Czech Republic, we change our official name, we change the structure of the nation. Czech Republic is no longer called the Czech Republic. Officially, it is Czechia. How much people actually use that name, I'm not sure. Much like people never really used the Republic of Hungary or the Third Hungarian Republic to call Hungary the state that actually was around, but that doesn't really matter. Let's move on to prime ministers, which is the row above, or actually reigning parties. Magyar Szocialista Munkáspárt, of course, from 56 until 89 was in power. Total adherence, I mean that there was basically no splitting of seats or revision of power at any point. The Magyar Szocialista Munkáspárt translates to Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party, so basically the socialist Kadarist government that was in power. The 1990 election saw the Hungarian Democratic Forum winning with 164 seats. Like I said, after 2012, the number of seats was changed. It was almost halved. So keep that in mind. The Hungarian Democratic Forum was a center-right party. They existed, I think, until 2016 or 2014. They were center-right. They helped to make the Third Hungarian Republic what it was. They had a very open understanding of democracy as it functioned, in terms of trying to get closer to Western European models such as Austria or France. So those were kind of the models for the Third Hungarian Republic. Then we had the Hungarian Socialist Party for a short period with Horn. Then the first election of Orbán Viktor I don't need to explain who he is. We'll talk a bit about him. Of course, 4 years is the regular election term. Hungarian Socialist Party again, and one more. We changed leaders between here. Prime Minister was first Medgyessy, then Gyurcsány Ferenc. Gyurcsány is also quite a divisive figure still in Hungarian politics, although he hasn't seen any respectable form of power or authority in, well, it's been 14 years, so not much of a contender anymore. And then we have basically from 2010 onwards the reigning of the Fidesz-KDNP alliance up until 2024, which is where we are now. But they are projected, if everything goes to plan, then they should be in power until 2026. Sometime in May there should be, or April, there should be election up for grabs again. So yes, I've already said some of the prime ministers that were in power in the past. Like we said, Gyurcsány, Medgyessy, Orbán, Horn. Unfortunately, our first prime minister, Antal József Tihamér, died in office. He was kind of the founding father of the Third Hungarian Republic. People still look up to him today. I wonder how politics would be different if he were still around, but that's just kind of a hypothetical. Of course, up until 89, we didn't really have elections at all. Well, we did, we'll get into that in a moment, but Kádár was both the prime minister and the president. These roles were not separated at the time. And then we had a short period in which Szűrös Mátyás was the president, but we had no prime minister. The presidents were, of course, Göncz Árpád, and keep in mind that presidents are not 4 years, but they are 5. So 5 years for each president. Göncz Árpád, who was part of the Szabad Demokraták Szövetsége, the alliance of Free Democrats. He was in power for 10 years, so 2 consecutive terms. Then we moved to Mádi Ferenc. Mádi Ferenc was an independent president. So was Sólyom László. Schmidt Pál was an interesting figure. He was only in power for 2 years. He had to resign. He was the first president to resign. He resigned because it was revealed at a certain point, a big scandal was started over his 1992 doctoral diploma or papers. He seems to have plagiarized basically all of his doctoral papers. Then we have Áder János. Áder János was in power for 2 consecutive terms, and that's how we end up at 2022 with the election of the very first female president in Hungary's history, which is Novák Katalin Éva. She was only in power for 2 years. She had to resign for reasons that we will get into very shortly. And then, of course, Kövér László, who was he is a Fidesz-affiliated politician. He did not serve as prime minister or president. He served as president as kind of a temporary thing. Now we have Súlyog Tamás in power, who Wikipedia states that he's an independent. That is absolutely incorrect. He is the Fidesz-KDNP candidate, or he was the Fidesz-KDNP candidate for the recent presidential election. So let's move to the elections themselves, shall we? So the 1985 Hungarian parliamentary election was a single round election. Voter turnout was really high, but keep in mind that voter turnout at the time was forced. People working jobs would be forced to go to the polls, and both candidates, which is Kádár János József and the other minor independent candidates running for office, were under the Hazafias Népfront alliance, basically the Patriot Front alliance. So these elections basically meant nothing. You could vote for anyone, it didn't really matter. Or actually, I should say, you needed to vote for someone, but it didn't really matter who you voted for. And then we get to 1990. One small note is that these maps are all made by Erin the Cute. She contributes using Inkscape, which is free software. Yeah, you can find her work online. I fact checked it myself, but if any of these canvases contain errors, please let me know. I made these myself, so some of them may be like typos and whatnot. So 1990, like we said, 386 seats up for grabs. Voter turnout was 65%, which is pretty much in line with Hungarian democracy, or at least most of it. The candidate that won was Antal József Tihamér. We've already talked about him. He's the one who died in office under the Hungarian Democratic Forum. Already here, Orbán was present under the Young Democrats Alliance, and interestingly did not win too many counties, but he did win over a couple of counties here and there. 1994 did not see the same kind of results. The Hungarian Democratic Forum slid from first place to third place. Voter turnout was pretty much the same at 68%. Keep in mind that we're talking about dual round elections. And we mostly had an overall gigantic win for the Hungarian Socialist Party, newly formed in 1990 under Gyula Horn. 1998 was a Fidesz victory, and although they did not win the overall percentage of votes, as you can see down here, they did, however, win the number of counties. You can see it on the map. This was a shock to basically everyone at the time, especially people living in the federal districts, which is the Budapest area. Yeah, everyone was expecting basically to elect Horn for another 4 years. Then we move to 2002, and notice how already we are moving from a healthy, contested, democratic environment to basically a two-party system, right? We have red and orange. That's it. That's basically it. Yeah, re-elected. Sorry, not re-elected. Orbán lost this election. We had Medgyessy as the winning prime minister candidate. Both parties, however, did gain a couple of seats in the election, and we actually had a center-right alliance between Fidesz and the Hungarian Democratic Forum before their dissolution, which is kind of interesting. Then in 2006, we go back to a couple more colors, but mostly the same, red and orange. This time we had the Gyurcsány government in place, newly formed, obviously the first of its kind. Hungarian Socialist Party gained a couple seats, Fidesz lost a couple seats. The Hungarian Democratic Forum decided to split from Fidesz KDNP alliance, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. Then we move to where things really start going downhill. This is basically the death of Hungarian democracy. You can really start to see the issues here. It's not even a two-party state anymore. It's really just a one-party state with a straw man that's the opposition. And the opposition will get into why they are a straw man, but here you can see voter turnout was pretty much normal, 64.3%. That's pretty much in line with all of the other elections. Fidesz and the Keresztény Demokrata Néppárt, 52.7%, an absolutely massive victory for these guys. At the time, this was expected because there was a gigantic scandal with Gyurcsány about corruption and basically perversion of justice that we'll see, maybe we'll see going forward. Then we move on to 2014. Again, even if we were to take this as like a kind of like a two-party election system, this is not even close. This is a united opposition. The Hungarian Socialist Party, Together for Hungary, the Democratic Coalition, Dialogue, the Green Party, the Hungarian Liberal Party all decided to run for election together, and they didn't even muster 30% of the votes, which is kind of interesting. Jobbik is something that we've seen pop up in 2014. Jobbik is an extremist right party, far right party. Yes, and the Green LMP politics can be different. That's their party name. Is also something that we see pop up here. But overall, gigantic victory for Fidesz again, 28. And keep in mind, something that I forgot to mention, you can see the difference between counties here. 4 is no longer here, right? They decided to split up those counties in order to have the maximum amount of counties winning for the Orange Alliance, so to speak. So again, a reshaping of democracy here going on in 2012. 2018, basically the same thing, this time no united opposition. And in second place was Jobbik. Jobbik is a far-right party, like I said a couple of times. Voter turnout was pretty much the same, 69.7%, which is in line with Hungarian elections. And then we go to the last election, which is 2022, Hungarian parliamentary election, 69.59%, in line with everything. Fidesz has a massive victory against a newly united opposition, which is what we see in blue. They basically only managed to win a couple of districts, such as Hódmezővásárhely and some of the federal districts, not even all of them, as you can see. But yeah, a united opposition could not even muster 35% in this case. They just suffer so much. Perhaps it was because of our candidate here, Márki-Zay Péter. He was not a particularly popular option. Karácsony Gergely was meant to run for election, but he pulled out. So the united opposition needed to find another candidate. And that's how we ended up with this. Toroczkai is somebody that we'll talk about later on. 2026 Hungarian parliamentary election. This is just a prediction of mine. It's a single round election, much like all of the elections after 2012. I think voter turnout will be pretty much the same, maybe a little bit lower than the elections that we've seen before. The parties running are still pretty much unknown, but we have a democratic alliance under Dobrev Klára with the Democratic Coalition, the Hungarian Socialist Party, Dialogue, and the Social Democratic Green Alliance. And of course, Orbán under the Fidesz-KDNP alliance that we've already seen. Somebody that's new on the scene is Magyar Péter. Magyar Péter is a lawyer. We'll talk about him also later on. He's running a new campaign known as Tisza. Tisza is a river in Hungary, but in this case it's short for Tisztelet és Szabadság Párt. Basically meaning Respect and Freedom Party. He's kind of a third way kind of politician guy, in the sense that he doesn't really have any ideas other than reform in terms of getting the Fidesz-KDNP alliance out of government. Will he win this new election coming up? I don't think so. My prediction is that he will do good, but not that good. Although with that being said, his forte seems to be converting senior citizens to vote for his party, which is a big thing, especially in the current European environment, because, well, basically all nations are old now, right? Anyway, so those are the elections, right? You have the entire history here. Again, maps are made by Erin the Cute. I want to give a big shout out to her. Thank you for contributing all this stuff. And you can start to see in the last 4 elections that, like I wrote here, this is clearly not a healthy democracy. Therefore, we already enter the flawed democracy territory. Now we must examine the differences between flawed democracy and hybrid regime. What do these two terms mean? We'll view it in a moment, but these definitions were given by the Economist Intelligence Unit, and they classify Hungary as a flawed democracy. This is what I'm trying to prove is actually wrong, and is the best type of wrong, because it's wrong by their own criteria, by their own definitions. So yeah, really, really great. As a bit of context, in total, Orban has been in power for a combined length of 18 years, 20 years if he completes his current term so far. As examples of anti-democratic leaders, the West may cite, so basically people that we've been talking about for a few years. Erdogan has been in power for a combined length of 10 years. Netanyahu has been in power for 17 years. Putin has been in power for a combined length of 25 years. And Merkel was in power for 16 years. So you can already start to see, 20 years is quite a bit. If we are to declare those practices and terms as anti-democratic, we should not make Hungary the exception to this rule. That's my personal opinion, but we'll also see why it's coherent with the definitions and the criteria that we've been given. It's unfair to declare Hungary a democracy post-2012. It's unfair to its citizens, to its electors, and to anyone involved with its internal affairs. So, like I said, Economist Intelligence Unit, they classify, and we can view the map here, they basically classify all kinds of government types into 4 categories. You'll have authoritarian, hybrid regime, flawed democracy, and then full democracy, which is what I call healthy democracy. That's what some sources call it. And they'll give them a point from 10 to 0, basically. But I don't think anybody dips below 1, so 1 might be the minimum. Anyway, citing definitions by the Economist Intelligence Unit, flawed democracies are nations where elections are fair and free and basic civil liberties are honored, but may have issues. For example, media freedom infringement and minor suppression of political opposition and critics. These nations can have significant faults in other democratic aspects, including underdeveloped political culture, low levels of participation in politics, and issues in the functioning of governance. Pretty much all those things are true for Hungary, but there's more to it. There's a lot more things that are true about Hungary, which we'll see in a moment. Also, you can read these definitions at this source, which is via the Internet Archive, has been archived. Hybrid regimes are nations with regular electoral frauds, preventing them from being fair and free democracies. These nations commonly have governments that apply pressure on political opposition, non-independent judiciaries, widespread corruption, harassment and pressure placed on the media, anemic rule of law, and more pronounced faults than flawed democracies in the realms of underdeveloped political culture, low levels of participation in politics, and issues in the functioning of governance. Perfect. So what I'm saying is, even by their own criteria, which they give us here, the Economist Intelligence Unit is so incompetent that they can't label this, using these patterns, they can't label nations correctly. So let's look at, or I guess they just don't want to do their research. Let's look at this map. What we see here is basically all of Europe is pretty much healthy or flawed democracy. Most of them are flawed, which is the prevalent value, I guess. No nations dip below 3 except for Belarus, which is a hybrid regime. It is authoritarian, I should say. So is Russia. And what we see here in particular is, notice these numbers. Hungary is placed at 6.5. But this is, by the way, Visual Capitalist. You can find them at visualcapitalist.com. Hungary is placed at 6.5. Now that's below certain nations like Turkey, like Ukraine, like Bosnia, like Georgia. Now, certainly, these nations have their faults, but it's just not coherent to say that these nations are or have a less democratic system than what Hungary has. It's just not true. The fact that the Economist Intelligence Unit places Hungary in the same category as Spain, France, the Czech Republic, or even the United States, which I'll cite in a moment, just shows their incompetence on the matter. Moreover, Turkey was placed under Hungary by more than 2 points. You can see that here, 4.35. Like I said before, Erdogan has only been in power for 10 years. 10 years. And Orban has been in power for 20. For now. He may be in power for 24, 28, 32. We don't know. We just don't know. And even if you look it up on Google, right? You just look it up. Who's the dictator of Hungary? What's the first result you'll get? Viktor Orban. Pretty simple. Google seems to know what's up. So the key differences that I need to demonstrate in order to say that the Economist Intelligence Unit is actually wrong about Hungary is the differences which they underlined in their two definitions. One of those differences was regular electoral frauds, which we'll look at right now. The other one was pressure on political opposition, which we'll look at in two other canvases. And then non-independent judiciaries, which is an anemic rule of law or perversion. I would call it regular perversion of the course of justice. So deviations of justice for political reasons, right? So let's start with electoral frauds. The last two elections have seen quite a bit of criticism, not only for their practices, but also for the systems on which they were made, on which they were built. So let's start with the 2018 one, which is up here. And the note I've written for it is up here. And then the 2022, which is down here. And again, there will be sources cited for everything that I say. There we go. So the 2018 Hungarian election has had considerable suspicion cast on it by multiple sources for potentially fraudulent practices. Unhacked Democracy Europe, a non-profit election watchdog, found that 16.37% of ballot counting officials in 579 distinct polling stations had experienced anomalies or irregularities during their time administering the 2018 election, of whom 72.2% were able to share details about the irregularities themselves. Here's a list of the anomalies. These anomalies included, but were not limited to, opposition parties dismissed volunteers for eventual party delegates, which is playing into my opinion that the opposition is also some kind of straw man built up by the Fidesz-KDNP alliance. Transportation of phantom voters from Ukraine and Romania via public transport to polling stations. What they mean by phantom voters is people without any kind of ID, registration, address, anything like that. Confusion around minority voters' requirements and rights. Absence of ID card checks as mandated by Hungarian electoral law. Delegates instructing senior citizens to vote for Fidesz. Delegates instructing minorities to vote for Fidesz. Signatures scripted on voter log before voter log was correctly and fully compiled. Bribing of economically lagging communities to vote for certain parties. Absentee voters being grouped in the same queue as local voters who do not even have a queue. There's something unique to the Hungarian system, but still. Interference by municipality delegates against party delegates during ballot stamping and turnout calculation. Election software failure spanning multiple hours through the evening of election day. Absentee ballots sharing a ballot box with local ballots. Missing and extra ballots cast in almost every county. This is a major point, by the way. In almost every county, there were either too many or too little votes compared to what the voter log said. Absence of ballot box stamps and seals. Non-correspondence of numbers and percentages to the same result in multiple counties. 5.6% of all polling stations experienced a ticket splitting percentage between Fidesz candidate and Fidesz party themselves, higher than 4% of votes. 1% of total votes from Hungarian citizens with a permanent address outside Hungary went missing. We'll talk about what this means actually in terms of Hungarians with a permanent address outside of Hungary. Absence of voter log photocopy as mandated by Hungarian electoral law. Opposition parties did not ask for voter log photocopies. Opposition parties did not poll their delegates post-election for feedback or anomalies. Now that's a gigantic list. And for all of these, there were multiple accounts from multiple different polling stations. So I guess it's a lot to consider, but when you read these two sources, it really starts to come together as to how the system is actually shaped to I wouldn't really call it a fraudulent election. It's more like a phantom election, you know. But you can read more about that down here. Instead, the 2022 Hungarian election also presented multiple irregularities and anomalies. Multiple sources deemed the election not just unfair, but also manipulated and fraudulent, stating that the election itself is not winnable or even meaningful for the newly unified opposition, as the nomenclatura's efforts at rigging and manipulating the election are clearly evident with a wide range of sophisticated tools. Essentially, while the election is not rigged and meaningful discourse is not suppressed, always, I should add, by physical violence, see for example Russia, which this is done regularly. The election is, however, meaningless due to a range of phantom factors produced by the reshaping of the entire electoral system. The anomalies and or irregularities surrounding this election included all of the previous forms from the 2018 one, so see the list which I've already read, with the addition of two more factors: the burning and discarding of ballots cast by Hungarian electors with a foreign permanent address, and minorities being told their ballots were already cast by their representatives. What do these two factors mean? Basically, in Romania, people found burnt ballot boxes by the side of the road. Some of them were still visible with the votes that people had actually cast. Most of them actually went towards the alternative right party named Our Homeland. You can read about that in these links, one of these links. Yeah. And minorities being told their ballots were already cast by their representatives. What that means is basically the Roma minorities would show up to a polling station and they'd be told that their Roma representative had already voted for them. So that's basically it. I feel like if this doesn't demonstrate that there's regular electoral fraud going on, again, it's quite vague by what they mean. Regular means, I mean, I interpret it as the last two elections. There's regular electoral fraud and there's multiple accounts of it and a gigantic list of factors which could be deemed fraudulent, right? So I feel like we have demonstrated that point, but we'll come back to this checklist later. For now, let's move on to the second canvas. I'll meet you there. Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. So the second canvas that I've prepared here is about Hungarian referendums, or I should say referenda, which is, I don't know, in English we just don't say that, but that is the correct term. I've underlined here where the Fidesz-KDNP alliance starts gaining 2/3 majority, which is after 2012. So starting here, this is the 2012 year, and then onwards. This is the premise. The number of referenda or referendums in Hungarian history is 8, which places it in the middle of the pack for the European continent, at least for what concerns non-totally representative democracies like Belgium. Belgium is a particular case in which referendums are actually unconstitutional. Basically, in Belgium, the constitution states that the people do not have a right to govern, but they do have a right to elect those who govern. That's the difference for them. Most European nations are actually placed in between the two. They're not totally representative and they're not totally direct democracies. This is what Hungary is. I'm claiming here that ever since 2012, Hungary has not been a representative or direct democracy. So the first referendum, can I squeeze this in frame? Yes. The first referendum comes in 1989. This is the 4 yes referendum. This is mostly referring to the new constitution, the new fundamental law. So 1989, the 4 yes referendum, voter turnout was 58%. Total votes were 4 million and a bit. You can see the original questions on this side, which is in Hungarian. I'll read those in English. All of these received a yes vote. Voter turnout was high enough to be approved. All of these proposals were approved. So, should the president be elected after parliamentary elections? This was a very split call. Lots of people were very divided on this question, this proposal. But in the end, it still passed narrowly. So, yeah. Should organizations related to the Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party be banned from workplaces? At this point, there was an anti-socialist sentiment in Hungary, which was fair enough. And this proposal was passed. Should the Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party account for its properties owned or managed by it? Yes, again. Should the workers' militia be dissolved? Yes. The workers' militia were basically like the Stasi in East Germany. So actually they were maybe a little bit worse, but still. All of these were approved pretty much unilaterally, except for the very first question, which some people were still... The problem with it was that people were kind of undecided. They looked around and they saw European nations just kind of in limbo between left and right and never really making any truly large decisions because of this kind of back and forth. And that's why I think people were kind of hesitant. Plus, Hungary had never really seen much of this kind of parliamentary democracy. We did have prime ministers in the past, but nothing like this. So, yeah, that should explain people's hesitation. The 1990 Hungarian presidential election referendum saw a voter turnout of 13.91%, which is very low. People did not show up for this this referendum. Mostly because I don't think they cared. Do you want the president of the republic to be elected directly? The vote was yes in large majority, but it was dismissed because people didn't care enough. The president is not elected directly. The prime minister is elected directly. The president is elected by the parliament. So, although voter approval was 85.9%, the referendum was dismissed because turnout did not meet quota. Then we moved to 1997, Hungarian NATO membership referendum. This was pretty straightforward. Voter turnout was 49%. Do you agree that the Republic of Hungary, notice how they use Republic of Hungary, should join NATO to ensure the country's protection? Yes. Voter approval was 85%. The proposal was approved. Hungary joined NATO. Pretty simple. And notice how all of these are direct proposals, so they actually have some kind of legal manifestation later on. Or even if they don't, they always include what the proposal would actually imply. 2003 Hungarian European Union membership referendum. This was another one of those referendums that kind of just breezed by. Do you agree that the Republic of Hungary should become a member of the European Union? Yes, unilaterally approved, basically. Here, we already start to see signs of a democracy that's starting to fall apart. 2004 Hungarian dual citizenship and healthcare privatization referendum. This one was a big deal. People did not like this one. And keep in mind that 2004 was during the MSP, so Hungarian Socialist Party reign or stay in power. So they messed up badly. And we'll read about this in a moment. But for now, the two questions were, do you agree with the notion that public health service institutions and hospitals should remain state or local government property? And in accordance with that, the parliament should repeal the contradictory law? Yes, mostly, yes. So the healthcare system remained state property. Do you want the parliament to pass a law that enables ethnic Hungarians with non-Hungarian citizenship and residence who affirm their Hungarian nationality either with a Hungarian identity card described in paragraph 19 of Act 62 of 2001, or in a way specified in the forthcoming law, to apply for and be granted Hungarian citizenship? Voters were very divided on this one. In the end, both of them were dismissed because voter turnout did not meet quota. So we'll read about why the second question is actually so divisive. So, like I wrote here, this referendum was an extreme blunder by contemporary governing parties. At the time, the government in charge was the first Gyurcsány government, formed by the Hungarian Socialist Party and the Alliance of Free Democrats, which is the Hungarian Liberal Party, which is another party that is later on down the line kind of like a boogeyman of Hungarian politics. But anyway, question number 2 was a loaded question as it tried to sneak by integrating non-Hungarian voters into the electoral base under the guise of inclusion. Given this proposal, in order to apply for Hungarian citizenship, you do not have to have a Hungarian residence, speak the Hungarian language, or have live members of your family whom are Hungarian citizens. All you need is to be ethnically Hungarian. Now, this doesn't exactly contribute an ethno-state, but it's still, I mean, the way it's worded is interesting, to say the least. This was deemed at the time to be beneficial for both MSP and SDS. Instead, it ended up having a much larger effect on contemporary opposition parties, particularly the Hungarian right, so Fidesz-KDNP. So much so that in 2010, the newly elected Fidesz-KDNP government then made the citizenship acquisition process even easier. These new election rules made it so that citizens with an address in Hungary who are not present in the country on election day must travel to the polls at Hungarian embassies and consulates to cast their ballot. And unlike Hungarian citizens beyond the borders, they are not eligible to vote by mail. In 2013, Mesterházy Attila Csaba, then president of the Hungarian Socialist Party, apologized for this proposal, stating that in doing so, we damaged Hungarian relations and aroused feelings in Hungarian citizens living beyond the border that rightly offended them. It was a wrong political decision, and we apologize to all those who were hurt by it. Essentially, the Hungarian left made themselves a bed they then had to lie in. So the Hungarian left built up a system which the center-right actually took advantage of much more than they ever could. You can find the sources down here. I would have included more sources. I did find other links, but they don't lead anywhere. Those websites have been removed. Maybe if Internet Archive has them, I'm not sure. Usually I find more sources than this, but yeah. 2008 Hungarian fees abolition referendum. This one is also pretty normal. Do you agree that inpatient care should be exempt from daily hospital fees with effect from 1st of January in the year after the referendum is held on the present issue? Yes. Do you agree that family doctor care, dentistry care, and special outpatient care should be exempt from consultation fees with effect from the 1st of January in the year after the referendum is held on the present issue? Yes. Do you agree that students in state subsidized higher education should be exempt from tuition fees? Yes. Basically, everybody backed up healthcare and education being state subsidized, basically. And now we pass to the post 2012 referendums. The post 2012 referendums are basically not referendums, and there's only two of them, which, I mean, if you look at how these are spaced out and then these two, it may look normal, but I swear it's actually not. We've never had a gap this large in terms of referendums. So let's read the first one. 2016 Hungarian migrant quota referendum. This was gigantic at the time in international news. Basically, everybody in Europe was had turned anti-Hungary and anti-Hungarian at this point, and mostly because of this referendum. So let's read the question. It was only one question. Do you want the European Union to be able to mandate the obligatory resettlement of non-Hungarian citizens into Hungary, even without the approval of the National Assembly? Voter turnout was not enough to pass the proposal, but the general approval was 1.64%. So the approval would have been, the proposal would have been dismissed anyway. Let's read a little bit about what this referendum actually means. There was lots of debate and outcry about how this referendum's question was phrased, as it didn't express a clear message. A vote for this proposal would effectively be a vote against national authority and against the independence of Hungary as a nation. At the same time, a vote against could come across as an all-encompassing total refusal of accepting foreign refugees into Hungary. Below is a spreadsheet of what each active political party at the time recommended their members and followers to do with the referendum. So basically, the only party to say you should vote for this proposal was the Hungarian Liberal Party, which dissolved in, I think, 2018. They were just absolutely incompetent. They made the opposition look really bad. There was nothing about them that was redeemable at all. And of course, all the right-leaning parties, so Fidesz, KDNP, Movement for a Better Hungary, which is Jobbik. Jobbik actually means right, but it also coincides with better, so there you go. Hungarian Workers' Party, which is the Kadarist party, they have never gotten a seat in parliament. They're basically just useful idiots for the right-leaning parties. The Independent Smallholders Party, which is the Független Kisgazda és Polgári Párt. The Hungarian Justice and Life Party, Igazság és Élet Pártja, which is was actually a branch off of the Hungarian Democratic Forum at a certain point. All of the opposition parties, except for the Hungarian Two-Tailed Dog Party, which is kind of like an absurdist comedy party, and Politics Can Be Different, LMP, who are green liberals, told people to be absent at the polls. The Hungarian Two-Tailed Dog Party told their voters, told their followers to check both boxes. So notice that the parties recommending absence or invalidation are the opposition parties. They absolutely coincide except for the Liberal Party. The Hungarian Two-Tailed Dog Party declared stupid answers to stupid questions on its website and in flyers handed out to their followers, telling its members to cross both boxes as a nem igen. Nem igen means no yes, so kind of like a yes-no option in protest of the referendum. In particular, the capital, Budapest, had an 11.76% invalid vote percentage, the highest of any referendum so far. Invalid vote basically means either you checked multiple boxes, or you didn't check anything, or you checked something and then, I don't know, drew phallic imagery on the ballot, which was often done. So this is 2016. 2022. My, oh my, this referendum was something else. 2022 Hungarian gays in education referendum. Voter turnout was 68.5%, so in line with elections and everything. There were 4 questions. All of these were extremely divisive amongst mostly all of Hungary, especially the federal districts. Sorry, that was a hair on my mic. Let's read the questions. Of course, all of the original questions, just so you know, I haven't like mistranslated something, are present. Do you support holding information events on sexual orientation to minors in public education institutions without parental consent? No, obviously. Do you support the promotion of gender reassignment treatments to minors? No, we do not, obviously. Do you support the unrestricted exposure of minors to sexually explicit media content that may influence their development? No, we do not. Do you support showing minors media content on gender-changing procedures? No, we do not. And this is normal. Again, who would vote yes for these things? I guess here 7%, 4%, people that are just, I don't know, totally incompetent on this issue. But 95% for the most of these. Notice the invalid numbers. 1.7 million. Yeah, just gigantic numbers. Even if the proposal had a positive result, it would have been dismissed due to valid votes not meeting quota. This referendum, much like the 2016 one, produced outcry as the opposition parties and foreign news outlets declared it vigorously anti-gay. Some citizens also expressed concerns regarding the questions themselves being loaded and leading. A vote against all of the proposals below is common sense, but because of the nature of the questions themselves, could also be interpreted as anti-gay rhetoric, particularly so in question number 1, which was, do you support holding information events on sexual orientation to minors in public education institutions without parental consent? Again, the problem with that is it could be interpreted as, do you support gay or queer, I should say. I'm stuck in the past, but do you support queer teachers being allowed in public institutions for the education of minors, I guess? Again, strange, very strange phrasing. And much like the 2016 referendum, this one was also declared a farce, with opposition parties urging their members to invalidate their votes or to not cast their vote at all. This referendum saw by far the highest number of invalid and or blank votes cast at an extraordinary 20.91% minimum per question. And that's it for the history of referendums. Why did I bring this up? Because it shows that voting, not only in parliamentary elections, but also in referenda, is simply useless. There's nothing to it. It doesn't do anything. Hungary is not a democracy because there's no kind of decision process or decision-making process that's in the hands of the citizens themselves. So there you go. Let's move to canvas number 3 to look at pressure on political opposition and suppression of media. I'll see you there. All right. Okay. All right. So the first canvas is actually the entire history of Hungarian media, starting from 2000, the year 2000. I could have done 1989, but there's just no need. What I'm trying to showcase here is post 2012. In this case, in particular, I think it's better to label it as post 2015, but we'll look at all these things in a moment. So up here you have TV channels. We'll look into those in a moment. Down here you have radios, and then here you have digital media, which we'll also showcase in a moment. Did I? No, I did not. God damn it. Okay, god damn it. Okay. All right, so this is the third canvas. We're basically talking here about the entire history of Hungarian media, starting from the year 2000. I could have done 1989, but there's really no need to. I'm trying to demonstrate post 2012, so we're looking into that. And we have TV channels up here, timeline in the middle with all the years, radio down here, and then digital news outlets and newspapers, or ex-newspapers, I should say, so websites down here. We'll look into each and every one of these. I'll describe what company they lead to, when they were reformed, when they were taken over, what kind of opposition they have received from the nomenclatura, and I'll let you be the judge of how much suppression there is. So let's read my premise here. My premise in analyzing Hungarian media is that even in two-party systems, which is what Hungary has effectively been reduced to post-2012, like the United States, for instance, you would still be able to get both sides onto media outlets. If you want to get the Democrat point of view, you go to CNN. If you want to get the Republican point of view, you go to Fox News. The issue with Hungarian media is that the non-nomenclatura media has largely been reduced to a few websites. And even these websites have suffered constant attacks and consistent attempts at removal targeting them and their parent companies. Fundamentally, if as a Hungarian citizen you don't speak any other second language, your access to non-nomenclatura media is virtually inexistent, especially if you do not have access to the internet. I didn't write this down, but we have the least, Hungary has the least English-speaking nationals of any European nation, I think. So yeah, we do have a lot of people who speak German as a second language, but I don't know how much. I don't speak German, so I don't know what their access to independent media is in terms of actual Hungarian politics. The median age of Hungarian citizens is 42.2 years of age. The largest group by far is people 65 years or older, who sit at 19.9% of Hungary, which means the main electoral base in Hungary is senior citizens who are still unarmed against disinformation and propaganda. As of 2021, the percentage of people with regular access to the internet in Hungary is still only 76.8%. The percentage of Hungarians 65 years old or older who engage with any social media is 5.3% for women and 3.6% for men. The main social media is still predominantly Facebook, though younger people are slowly making the transition to other platforms such as YouTube. The main issue with the nomenclatura's unilateral control of media is that opposition party members and their candidates are never invited to hold talks on national television. Not only that, all of the other forms of media they interact with are blacklisted by the nomenclatura as strictly anti-establishment, so anti-Fidesz KDNP alliance. Essentially, the opposition party is reduced to a straw man, which they truly are. I mentioned this previously, given that their characteristics and proposals are decided by the nomenclatura, since they have no access to public service media, whose only purpose is to be knocked down in the following elections. To quote Reporters Without Borders, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has built a true media empire subject to his party's orders. While independent media outlets hold significant market positions, they are subject to political, economic, and regulatory pressures. I even disagree here with RWB, or I think RSF, Reporters Sans Frontières, in that they hold significant market positions. I really disagree. I think they don't, but that's up to them. Here's a couple of sources citing what or talking about what I just cited. So social media usage, which I cited here, 5.3%, 3.6. Population age, which I cited up here. And then an RSF evaluation detailing KESMA, which is the Közép-Európai Sajtó és Média Alliance, I should say. So the Central European Press Association or whatever, which the Hungarian state uses to control media. So let's start with TV. The early establishment television channels and radios are basically M1, M2, Kossuth, Petőfi, and then Magyar Radio. All of these were founded before the fall of the wall. These had other names before, Magyar 1 és Magyar 2, but that doesn't really matter. Again, TV channels, you can see here, M1, M2, M2 Petőfi, M3, M4, which is Sport, M4 Pro, or I should say Sport Plus, M5, which doesn't exist anymore, Duna World, Pesti TV, which is quite divisive, Hír TV, Echo TV, Bonum, which is the Hungarian Catholic TV, Euronews, ATV, and then D1, which is Domino, which doesn't exist anymore either. So all of these M channels were co-opted around, you can see here, 2012, 2015, 2013, 2015, 2016, 2020 is when M4 Sport Plus was founded, and they all relate to the Duna médiaszolgáltató zárt körülön működő non-profit részvénytársaság. NER Media, which is basically Nemzeti Együttműködés Rendszere, National Cooperation System, starting in 2015. You can read more about that here. The RSF report also includes some talks of it. So yeah, all of the M channels were co-opted starting around, 2012, but mostly 2015. Duna was also taken over. They were part of the Duna Media Corporation, so they were also co-opted. Pesti TV was founded as a alt-right kind of young Sam Hyde kind of thing, kind of like absurdist comedy, but at the same time also actual politics. They are mostly, their whole concept is Budapest residents who are aligned with Fidesz-KDNP, which doesn't happen that often, even though the capital districts are always highly contested. Then we have Hír TV. Hír TV was integrated in 2018. Was it 2018? No, 2019. With the KESMA, we've already mentioned them. They are a state-founded thing. CEPMF is a state-run foundation controlling some of the available outlets. The foundation has been criticized by international sources for being blindly pro-nomenclatura. The news outlets owned by the foundation were acquired or founded by allies of Fidesz leadership, basically the nomenclatura, which I have already mentioned. You can read all about that at these sources. I'll leave it up on screen for a few moments. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Bonum, Catholic television, like I mentioned, Catholic television. Of course, they are aligned with the right. It makes sense. I mean, Christian Democratic Alliance. It just makes sense. Euronews is one of the only independent outlets. They're not actually independent. They are part of Euronews SA, which operates out of France, I think. So they are aligned with other political outlets. It's just that they aren't in Hungarian hands. Another source, which was ATV. ATV was in Hungarian hands, and it was a major non-nomenclatura source up until 2019, until it was taken over by Ott Media. Ott Media is a German company which has ties to the new party AfD, which I mean, I don't have to, or ADF. No, I think AfD. I don't have to talk too much about. Domino TV was a very short-lived non-nomenclatura television channel from 2006 to 2009. They mostly talked about Hungarian culture and history. Not much to see here. It's a shame that they disappeared so quickly because they were all right. Echo, did I mention Echo? Yes, Echo TV was another thing from 2006 up until 2019 when they were dissolved. That was taken over by the Kesma, or Keshma, I should say. I'm not sure when they were taken over, so I didn't really put an orange box for them, but they were taken over at some point by Keshma. So that's basically it for the TV channels. The only source which is still independent across all of the channels is Euronews, and they're not independent. They are actually run by a large corporation. In terms of radio, like we mentioned, we have Kossuth, Petőfi, Nemzetiségi, Parlamenti, Duna World, Magyar Radio, which doesn't exist anymore, and then Klub Radio, which was shut down in 2021. Let's read first about Klub Radio and Magyar Radio. Forced dissolution. What do I mean by that? Klub Radio was actually subject to a lot of controversy due to how they labeled and how they spoke about nomenclatura politicians. Their license was revoked, and then, well, actually it wasn't revoked. In 2021, they tried to extend their radio license, which needed renewing, and they just didn't get approval, even though they were the largest, basically the largest radio station in Hungary at that point. Magyar Radio was another one that was shut down and co-opted into what we now call Kossuth. It was founded in 1925. It was our first national radio. Fun fact about this, we actually violated the Trianon Treaty, which was, of course, after World War I, where we lost a bunch of territories. The treaty also included not building anything taller than the Eiffel Tower, and we violated that code by building a radio emitter that was 314 meters tall. So we violated that treaty to have a national radio, which was then dissolved. Duna World Radio was founded in 2012. Of course, it's part of Duna Corporation, the media corporation. Much like the rest of these, Parlamenti, Nemzetiségi, 2015 was Kossuth and Petőfi. These were newly founded, these didn't exist before, but these are basically the major radio stations. Nemzetiségi is something special because it speaks in multiple languages. It will speak Romanian, Croatian, and I think Slovak. I don't think it speaks German, but basically to appeal to the minorities living in and around Hungary. So there you go. In terms of websites, this is very interesting. Again, I only started this in 2000 because we don't really care too much. 444 is very interesting. It is basically one of the only independent sources still available. It was founded in 2013 by this company named Magyar Yeti ZRT, basically Hungarian Yeti Limited. Magyar Yeti versus Hungary was a case in the European Court of Human Rights in which the ECHR unanimously accepted the case as a violation of freedom of speech, Article 10. You can read more about that if you want to. HVG was another one of these that we'll speak about. HVG is an opposition outlet. Actually, I mixed these two up, but it doesn't matter. HVG is an opposition outlet. So was Index until a bit, 2020. In 2020, Index was converted to a pro-nomenclatura website and news source. And you can read more about that here. We'll also talk about it in the next canvas, so stick around. But I know this is kind of a wild claim, so I'll leave a lot of sources here. 1, 2, 3. There you go. You can read into that if you want to. Basically, all of the other websites have either always been Fidesz-KDNP aligned or have recently been co-opted. Video, which is a video hosting website, was founded by one of these companies, MediaWorks Hungary, which has always been Fidesz-KDNP aligned. 24.hu was co-opted in 2015 by switching to Central Media Csoport, ZRT. Startlap was another Central Media Csoport. I don't know when they were sold or when they were bought, but definitely were converted at some point. HungaryMatters.hu was actually a state-founded news source, which relates to Duna Media Corporation. And then these three here, Magyar Nemzet, Mandiner.hu, and Origo, all relate to the Kezma, which we have already talked about. An interesting case is, again, Pesti Srácok. Pesti Srácok is related to Pesti TV. Again, Budapest Fidesz-aligned news source. Telex is an interesting case. We'll talk a little bit more about it. Index, basically all of the founders of Index, which we can see here, which was co-opted in 2020, left to found Telex. And that's how this new media source was established. So that's basically all of the history of the media of Hungary. You can obviously see pressure on political opposition and media at the same time. You can really see how much orange is starting to appear here. There's basically only a few sources that are left. Like we said, Telex 444, HVG and Euronews. That's basically the only places left that you can get news. And I think Euronews actually doesn't speak, I may be misinformed about this, but it doesn't speak Hungarian. So there's no real Hungarian speaking TV channels that aren't state or nomenclatura aligned. So there you go. We'll move on to Canvas 4. That one is about the history of human rights violations and a couple of reported incidents that prove my point in terms of Hungary not being, or I guess Hungarian justice being perverted by the nomenclatura. So stay tuned. Okay, so here is the, oh shit. All right, so here is the entire history of the European Court of Human Rights in relation to Hungary, starting in, I think, 1992. We'll read a little bit about it. I want to give, for a moment here, an appreciation of colors. So basically, blue are simple, well, I say simple, but it's not really, human rights violations. So blue, all here, all of these. This is 2012. You can see how many human rights violations were done here. This is 2003. There were no violations up until 2003. So blue is normal. Dark blue is something that we'll talk about. There's only one of them. Red is related to minorities. You can really see a spike towards here. Definitely a few more. Orange is actually anything below the timeline is politically inclined. So all the orange and green stuff is political stuff. The green is actually the two which I disagree with. I think the Hungarian government and judicial system was right about. There are particular cases that we'll talk about. The orange is is the ones which I disagree with, and the European Court of Human Rights was right on. And I have 2 reported incidents, which I would love to add to this to showcase my, or to showcase the pressure put on political opposition in the past few years, and the perversion of the course of justice, basically showcasing that judiciaries are no longer independent in Hungary, and they've been co-opted to fit into this Fidesz-KDNP kind of nomenclatura. I know I say that too much, but still. So let's read my premise here. The European Convention on Human Rights is an international convention protecting rights and freedoms of signatory members, nations, citizens. It was signed on the 4th of November 1950 in Rome and became effective 3rd of September in 1953. All continental European states have signed this convention, with the exception of Belarus and Russia and Kosovo, current Council of Europe members. Hungary ratified the convention in 1992, and since then it has breached this convention a total of 73 times, which you can count if you want. The timeline is all there. All of these are distinct cases, some of which have multiple violations in them. Compare this to other European nations of similar size, such as Greece, which stands at 16, Portugal at 1, the Czech Republic at 2, Austria at 5, or Switzerland at 7. You will already see a shocking difference. Furthermore, the post-2012 violations are in total 53, which you've seen the spike there. Violations of Article 10 connected to the political sphere are in total 11, which is what you saw below the timeline, which is in line with the Hungarian nomenclatura's abuse of power and national and international law. And violations connected to minorities are 13, which is the ones you saw in red, all of which happened post-2011. European Convention on Human Rights, fundamental 18 articles. I feel like I have to cite these just to give context, but you can read more about them at these sources. I will read those, leave those up here too. So first, obligation to secure convention rights within jurisdiction. Basically, you need to do your best to keep this charter relevant. Obligation to refrain from unlawful killing, investigate suspicious deaths, and prevent foreseeable loss of life. Prohibition of torture and degrading treatment and/or punishment. Prohibition of slavery, servitude, and forced labor. Obligation to secure personal right to liberty and freedom. Obligation to secure the right to a fair trial. Prohibition of retroactive criminalization. Obligation to secure the personal right to respect for privacy, private life, family life, his home and his correspondence. Obligation to secure the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Obligation to secure the right to freedom of expression in accordance with the law, with restrictions for interests of national security. Obligations to secure the right to freedom of assembly and association. Obligation to secure the right for individuals of marriageable age to marry. Marriageable, I think, is the proper term. Obligation to secure the right for an effective remedy. Prohibition of discrimination. That's very wide. I don't know what they mean by that exactly, but that's what's written. Potential derogation of certain rights in a time of war or other public emergency, basically setting the guidelines for why this charter may be ignored in certain times. Potential restriction on the political activity of foreigners. Prohibition of securing the rights cited above in order to seek the limitation of rights cited above. Basically, you can't suppress one person's right to Article 10 because it would constitute a violation of another person's right to Article 9, for example. It's just not true. You just can't do that. And then prohibition of securing the rights cited above in a context other than that which is cited in the convention. So there you go. You can find all of the following cases via the link HUdoc. You can also find this charter at ECHR and also the convention via Internet Archive. So all of these are here. I'll leave those here for a couple seconds and we can move on. So let's start with this dark blue one. This dark blue one is kind of interesting because I'm not sure what actually happened here, whether this was an actually politically inclined ruling or not. It's still an interesting one, so I wanted to highlight it in case I'm wrong about it, but still. So Hagyó versus Hungary, violation of Articles 3, 5, 8, and 13. The case concerned the detention of Hagyó Miklós, a former deputy mayor of Budapest and former member of parliament, who was arrested for aggravated breach of trust for embezzling funds from the Budapest Transport Corporation BKV. He complained that his detention and house arrest had been unjustified and that the principle of equality of arms was not respected when he sought to challenge his detention. He also complained about his conditions of detention and the small number of family visits he had been allowed. Now, I don't think the ruling in favor of BKV, so the Budapest Transport Corporation, was incorrect. I think it was correct, but his treatment still violated those articles which I cited previously. So maybe not politically inclined, still an interesting case to read into if you want to. You can find it on HUdoc. Let's move into the actually politically inclined ones. And again, I'll give you an overview. These are the politically inclined ones. These here are minority things. This one we already read. So let's go. The green ones are ones that I disagree with in terms of the European Court of Human Rights. I believe they were absolutely correct. The Hungarian state was correct to enforce this judgment. Vajnai versus Hungary, 2008, violation of Article 10, that's the freedom of speech one. Conviction of the vice president of a left-wing political party for wearing a 5-pointed red star at a demonstration, which was interpreted as a symbol of the international workers' movement. And then the other one was Fratanolo versus Hungary, 2011, violation of Article 10, freedom of speech. The applicant, a member of the Hungarian Workers' Party 2006, the same one that I mentioned, which has never gotten seats in parliament. They're basically useful idiots. Complained about his conviction for wearing the 5-pointed red star, considered a totalitarian symbol by the Hungarian courts, at the demonstration on the 1st of May 2004 in Budapest. I absolutely disagree with these rulings, and for historical reasons. If you want to look into it, you should see Magyarországi Szocialista Szövetséges Tanácsköztársaság, so Socialist Federative Republic of Councils in Hungary. See also Vörös Terror, so the Red Terror of 1919. Basically a very bloody history or bloody period in Hungarian history. The Federative Republic of Councils had the Red Star as their main symbol. So it could definitely be interpreted as a totalitarian symbol. Article 10 has a definition for what constitutes freedom of speech. One of the caveats that they add to it is that it must be in line with the existence of a peaceful democratic society. I believe this was absolutely not in line with such a society or such a system. This was totally incorrect. I don't think that they should have been allowed to pull this symbol out, especially one that's so closely related to the parties that were actually referenced. Let's move on. Karakó versus Hungary, 2009, violation of Article 8. That's the one to violation of private life. Hungarian authorities did not act upon a criminal complaint which the applicant brought against another politician for having damaged his reputation during the 2002 parliamentary elections. This was kind of a weird case. Case was a weird fringe violation of personal right to family life and private life by flyers posted by opposition members. Karakó was a member of the Fidesz party. The interesting thing is that it's a weird fringe violation because technically he is a public figure. So according to Hungarian law, this should have been correct. There was no law to be enforced here. But according to the European Court of Human Rights, this was a violation. I agree with that, absolutely. This was not okay. I don't know why they did this, why the opposition members decided to do this. It again shows their incompetence. They're just absolute buffoons. they can't do two things right. Karzai versus Hungary, violation of Article 10, obligation for a historian to publish a rectification and pay considerable legal costs following the publication of his article in which he had criticized the right-wing press for making anti-Semitic statements. Here's the history of that lawsuit, claim. Karzai published an article on Élet és Irodalom, now es.hu, mostly defunct, in which he accused another historian of purposeful misinformation for having praised former Prime Minister Teleki Pál János Ede for his actions against Hungarian Jewish and Hungarian Romani populations. The first lawsuit for defamation was dismissed by the regional court. The second one was, however, ruled to be demonstrable defamation by the Budapest Court of Appeal. Karzai was ordered to rectify the publication, pay all legal costs, and pay additional legal fees. So basically, this historian guy called out right-leaning media for saying some very racist things, and the Budapest Court of Appeal's response to it was to fine the historian guy for exposing the right-wing media, which is completely insane. This would never happen in any of the nations I cited, like Greece, Czech Republic, or any of those. Here we get into actual media violations. So like I mentioned before, index.hu is something that we saw before. 444.hu was something that we saw also. Here's a couple of violations regarding them. Magyar Tartalomszolgáltatók Egyesülete, so Hungarian Media Corporations United, Union I should say, and index.hu Limited versus Hungary. This was 2016, violation of Article 10. 2016 and 2015 was the years in which Hungarian media was mostly taken over. The case concerned the liability of a self-regulatory body of internet content providers and internet news portal for vulgar and offensive online comments posted in their websites. After even more nomenclatura pressure, later on, index.hu staff resigned en masse and subsequently formed telex.hu after abandoning index.hu to be taken over by Inda Media as a nomenclatura-aligned news source. Karácsony and others versus Hungary. This was violation of Article 10, another one. The case concerned fines imposed on Hungarian MPs from two opposition members who had disrupted parliament proceedings by protesting against two bills being debated in parliament at the moment. Karácsony, Szilágyi, Dorosz, and Szabó were all members of the Dialogue for Hungary party. In 2014, they protested against the bill for the tobacco market being turned into state-run business or being subsidized by the Hungarian state by placing a large placard displaying the words Fidesz, you steal, you cheat, and you lie next to the Secretary of State's seat, while Cséfalvai, the Secretary of State for the national economy, was speaking on the matter. So they were fined for protest, basically. Peaceful protest, by the way. Baka versus Hungary, violation of Article 6 and 10. This is one of the ones that I want to underline the most. This was an absolutely shocking perversion of justice, and there's nothing that excuses something like this. And nobody was talking about it internationally. International media, especially European media, did not care about this. It's easy. What I'm trying to say is it's easy to now berate Hungarian citizens for actions that their government is taking, but it would have been a lot easier to intervene back in 2016 instead of like now trying to kick Hungary out of the European Union 8 years later, right? Anyway, Baka versus Hungary 2016, violation of Articles 6 and 10. The case concerned the premature termination of the mandate of Mr. Baka, President of the Hungarian Supreme Court, following his criticism of legislative reforms and the fact that he was unable to challenge that decision before a court. His 6-year term of office was brought to an end 3.5 years before its normal date of expiry through the entry into force of the fundamental law, the new constitution, the 2012 constitution that I cited, which provided for the creation of the Curia, the highest court in Hungary, to succeed and replace the Supreme Court. Absolute travesty, absolute perversion of justice. Mr. Baka was elected in 2009 after 17 years of service as a judge at the ECHR as president of the Supreme Court for a 6-year term until 2015. In 2011, Baka openly criticized various reforming laws and provisions which changed the mandatory retirement age of judges from 70 to 62 years of age, stating that the proposal was humiliating and infringed the principles of the independence and irremovability of judges. The new retirement age has been regulated in the fundamental law, which is the 2012 revised constitution, to avoid any possibility of judicial review by the Constitutional Court, and suggested that there has been political motivation behind that approach. The new body will have excessive, unconstitutional, and uncontrollable powers. Later that same year, under the nullification bill approved by the 2/3 majority of Fidesz and KDNP alliance in parliament, Mr. Baka was dismissed from his appointed role for speaking against these judicial reforms, thus constituting a violation of Article 6, which is unlawful dismissal, specifically of a public official, and 10, which is unlawful suppression of speech. Again, this was gigantic. Nobody spoke about this. I don't know why they didn't speak about this. This was basically a turning point in Hungarian justice that nobody paid attention to. And then the last one of 2016 is a violation of Article 10. The case concerned the authorities' refusal to provide an NGO with information relating to the work of ex officio defense counsel, as the authorities had classified that information as personal data that was not subject to disclosure under Hungarian law. This was a violation of Article 10. We'll read about why. MHB, which is the Magyar Helsinki Bizottság, which is the Hungarian Helsinki Association. The applicant NGO monitors the implementation of international human rights standards in Hungary. MHB carried out continuous advocacy activities for reform of the ex officio appointment system. In the assessment, their research showed that the system of ex officio appointed defenders did not operate adequately, essentially because the investigative authorities, in particular the police, were free to choose defense counsel from a list compiled by the relevant bar associations. MHB then requested that 6 different police departments disclose requested information. All but one, the Hajdú Bihar County Police Department, complied. Hajdú Bihar is North Hungary. The names of the defense counsel are not public interest data, nor information subject to disclosure in the public interest, since defense counsel are not members of a body performing state, municipal, or public duties. Thus, their names constitute private data which are not to be disclosed under the law. The ECHR concluded that there had been an interference with the MHB's freedom of expression under Article 10, and in particular that interference was not prescribed by law and was pursuing a legitimate aim and was necessary in a democratic society. So again, perversion of justice here. Magyar Yeti ZRT versus Hungary. This is something that we already cited with 444.hu. This is 2018, violation of Article 10. The case concerned the applicant company being found liable for posting a hyperlink to an interview on YouTube, which was later found to contain defamatory content. Again, not how that works. 444 is still independent. There's a lot of pressure on them currently. I hope they stay around because they're basically the only Hungarian outlet other than Telex, which still concerns Hungarian politics. The case concerned Surovec versus Hungary, 2019, violation of Article 10. Notice that these are all violations of Article 10. The case concerned media access to reception facilities for asylum seekers. A journalist for an internet news portal complained about the authorities' refusal of his request to carry out interviews and take photographs at the Debrecen reception center, thus preventing him from reporting on the living conditions there. The applicant Surovec was connected to opzug.hu, an independent news website focusing on living conditions across Hungary, which shut down on New Year's Eve of 2020 due to nomenclatura pressure. So another suppression of media. Magyar kétfarkú kutyapárt versus Hungary. the Hungarian two-tailed dog party, which we mentioned regarding the 2016 referendum. 2020, violation of Article 10. The case concerned a political party's mobile application which allowed voters to photograph, anonymously upload, and comment on invalid votes cast during a referendum on immigration in 2016, which is the immigration referendum or migrant quota referendum. The MKKP, Hungarian two-tailed dog party, associated phone application called Cast an Invalid Ballot was developed for users to anonymously upload photographs of their ballots or their activities they were doing instead of showing up to the polls. The app was developed so that neither the MKKP nor the developer were able to trace the smartphones, and the application did not permit selfies in order to protect the user's privacy. 3,894 photos were made with the app, and the MKKP was fined for influencing voters and thus constituting unlawful campaigning by the Supreme Court. This was struck down by the European Court of Human Rights, as the app was an important watchdog, as it had been aimed at monitoring the fairness of the referendum. Mandli and others versus Hungary, 2020, violation of Article 10. The case concerned the suspension of the applicant's parliament accreditation as journalists. All of these guys were, I don't know how many of them there were. I think it was like 8 journalists who were not accredited as journalists. They were connected to exclusively independent newspapers at the time. So Index, 24.hu, and hvg.hu. Index is no longer independent, nor is 24.hu. hvg still is. Exclusively independent, I simply mean that none of the journalists that were not credited as journalists, or none of the journalists involved in this case, were nomenclatura aligned. All of those journalists were okay. It only affected the independent newspapers and media sources. So another thing to keep in mind. So that's basically all the human rights violations. Like I said, mostly all of these go against the opposition, except for this one here, which I do agree with. That was absolutely a correct ruling. We have 2 yellow notes, which I would love to add. These are actually more important than anything, I think. These are notes which, while didn't receive a court order or a ruling, I think are more important than these human rights violations, because they reflect the state of Hungarian politics right now much more. Okay, so Varga Judit, the first one is about Varga Judit and Magyar Péter. Varga Judit is a Hungarian lawyer and ex-Minister of Justice. She served as Minister of Justice from her appointment in July 2019 until her resignation in June 2023. She was married to Magyar Péter, current leader of the Respect and Freedom Party, which I already mentioned, from 2006 to 2023. In an audio recording of a conversation with Magyar, she alleges that Hungary is a mafia state that one cannot simply get out of. In March of 2024, both her and Magyar alleged that the nomenclatura has subjected us to 3 years of wiretapping and operating with falsified police reports. You can read more about that at these 2 links. It absolutely reflects the way that the nomenclatura currently handles opposition parties which are starting to gain momentum. Not literally. Momentum is another incompetent opposition party. But the other one involves, this is very recent, this only happened in February 2024. This one involves the president of Hungary. I was about to say republic, but that's not a thing anymore. Veresnyi Novák Katalinéva, she's the first president to be female, which is interesting, is a Hungarian politician, ex-minister for family affairs, and ex-president of Hungary. She served as president from her appointment in May 2020 until her resignation in February 2024. In April 2023, Novak and the office of the prime minister issued a series of presidential pardons for criminal convictions. These pardons caused quite a stir in the public sphere, even amongst nomenclatura-aligned news outlets. 2 pardons stuck out in particular. These divided the public the most. Budahasi György, a Hungarian nationalist and far-right activist. In 2006, Budahasi and Toroczkai, current leader of the Our Homeland movement, who I already mentioned, founded the Hunya organization. Hunya is actually a misnomer. Hungary was never called Hunya. Before the invasion of the barbaric tribes, it was called Pannonia and, of course, Carpathia. And at no point was it called Hunya. So again, the right-leaning opposition also knows nothing about history, particularly Hungarian history. This organization carried out multiple violent attacks against state-affiliated activities by setting them on fire. In 2009, Budahasi was declared a domestic terrorist and was imprisoned for various militant offenses. He was pardoned. So basically we let out a domestic terrorist. The other guy was Konya Endre, ex-deputy director of Kossuth Zsuzsa Children's Home, an orphanage in Bicske, Fejér County. In 2021, Konya was convicted of covering up the director's molesting of children at the institution, spanning 12 years between 2004 and 2016. János Vásárhelyi, the director of the institution, was also sentenced in 2021, though he did not subsequently receive a pardon. Essentially, Novák and Balogh Zoltán, synod of the Hungarian Reformed Church from February 2021 until February 2024, had pardoned a convicted pedophile months after the National Assembly worked day and night to prevent same-sex couples from adopting children under a child protection narrative. Needless to say, this inflamed tensions between Hungarian electors and the nomenclatura. Multiple politicians on both sides of the political axis explicitly stated that they had both, by both I mean Novák and Balogh, perverted the course of justice. Protests erupted all across the nation, calling for Novák and Balogh to resign. They both did. However, even though Novák apologized profusely for her actions, the pardons were not modified, and so Budahasi and Konya were free to walk as it stands. They're still free men. I'll leave all of those links up on screen for a few moments. There we go. And so that's the perversion of justice that I wanted to get to. Let's go back to the points of difference, which I wanted to elaborate on. And so here we are. These are the points of difference which I wanted to demonstrate. Regular electoral frauds. If you consider regular as the last two elections have seen major fraudulent activity, then that's absolutely correct. Pressure on political opposition is absolutely correct. They have held the opposition hostage politically for the last 8 or so years, maybe even more, maybe 12 years actually, but multiple cases going back to that, the case against Karácsony, all of the media suppression, all of that going on. And then non-independent judiciaries, the Baka versus Hungary case was absolutely gigantic. The pardon scandal was gigantic. There's so many cases to cite that it's almost too much to talk about. One thing which I did not mention was hybrid regimes, widespread corruption. I mean, look, there's just so much to talk about in terms of this stuff. Like we could talk about Mészáros Lőrinc, Márki-Zay Péter even, who is part of the newly founded opposition, Orbán himself and the Felcsút cronies, Németh Szilárd, Gattyán György. There's just so many to talk about that it's, I mean, I don't need to demonstrate corruption here. I feel like it isn't even under the radar. If you want to investigate corruption by yourself, I recommend reading into it. I don't need to. It's just basically common knowledge at this point, even by Hungarian citizens. So with that being said, let's move back to the premises, which is what I wanted to demonstrate. So these are the things that I wanted to demonstrate. Demonstrate that post-2012 Hungary is not a healthy democracy. I agree with the economics economics intelligence unit on this. It's not a healthy democracy. In fact, I don't think it ever has been. Maybe in 1998, but or even in 1990, but not really. It is not a flawed democracy. I've already demonstrated that. These two coincide. It's not a totalitarian government because it could, the 2/3 majority could still be lost, and therefore the opposition could have some influence. Maybe in 2026 that's what we'll see happen. But yeah, just it is a hybrid regime. And then demonstrate that Hungarian citizens have virtually no access to independent media. If you don't speak a second language, which most Hungarian citizens don't, then you have no access to something like that. And then demonstrate that Hungarian citizens have virtually no control over the hybrid regime's decision making. I feel like I demonstrated that with the pardon scandal. That was a unanimously scandalous affair on both sides of the political spectrum, I should say. Nobody liked that decision. We had no say in it, not even the people that voted Fidesz-KDNP. There was just no reason to adopt that decision except for, of course, this nomenclatura-aligned point of view where these guys were actually friends with, close friends with whatever ties they had with the political parties of Fidesz and KDNP. So that's basically all I wanted to demonstrate. I want to thank you very much for watching, and maybe drop a like, subscribe, whatever. If you saw me make a mistake somewhere or commit an error in speaking somewhere in this video, it was just a mistake. Please correct me on it. I will put a pinned comment if there are any eventual corrections. And thank you for watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope that you can use this info to your advantage, I guess. I'll speak to you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye.